Hello, welcome to the From Way Downtown Pacers podcast. I'm Pacers editor Nat Newell for the Indy Star. Here, of course, with Dustin Dopriak, our Pacers insider, who is in the Boston area after flying straight from New York to Boston because he never had a doubt that the Pacers were going to win Game 7, even though he picked against them.
Yes.
We'll start recapping the Knicks series. The big thing everyone's talking about is that the national media couldn't care less about the Pacers and only would talk about the Knicks. Do you get Rick Carlisle referenced that. How much does that matter to these guys?
It matters when they get to have a post-game press conference and shove it in everyone's face. They enjoy that. Tyrese Halliburton enjoys that in particular. You could tell he got some gusto out of that one. And so I don't know if they knew that I picked against them, but they saw the list from ESPN that everybody was like 16-0 from whoever was on that, just saying that the Knicks were going to win this series. And obviously, this series changed when OG Anunoby went down, and the OG Anunoby that showed up for Game 7 was not the same guy that you saw in Game 1 and Game 2 before his injury. So, I get why everybody picked them, because that was a different Knicks team than was still available by Game 7. But they do enjoy that. They do definitely enjoy beating teams like that. I don't know if they sit around and think about it, but like Halliburton in particular is very keyed in to the national narrative, basically. He's just such a big, big NBA fan. And so he's reading everybody, he's watching everybody, he's taking notes and he notices this kind of thing. And I think he knows that he understands why the Pacers just aren't the draw that, the Knicks are and the Celtics are and the Bulls are and the Lakers are. That you understand, you're in a smaller market. You're not necessarily going to be followed as much. And, big ESPN, TNT TV types aren't going to pay as much attention to you. And he knows that, but I think he likes to throw that in their face every time they do something they're not expected to do. Because he said, we told our local media that we were going to make the playoffs, and none of you guys read that because you guys don't care anything about what we do until later.
Or maybe even not then.
Yeah, exactly. So it's but we did write it. Just for the record, there were stories about them thinking they were a playoff team. And I did think they were a playoff team. I believe that at the time. I did not expect them to be here. But no, they do get a kick out of that. I think certainly they don't know what the broadcast was like. It definitely seems to Pacers fans. I don't even know what the broadcast was like because I didn't watch it. I haven't watched a rewatch yet. But it definitely seems like Pacers fans had a legitimate gripe that, it was just very, very New York centric, certainly with Stephen A, not holding back the idea that he's a Knicks fan. So getting to throw that, I guess, in Knicks fans' faces or something I know Pacers fans are enjoying, and I imagine that these guys will eventually, appreciate it if they find out about it.
Yeah, I think part of this is, as certainly from our perspective, we know more of what people want to read, want to watch than we ever have before. And I don't think there's any doubt that nationally there's more interest in talk about the Lakers are the perfect example. The Lakers were a play-in team this year. They were a good team, but they weren't a great team. But people love Lakers talk. People love Golden State Warriors talk. Part of that is, LeBron's earned it. The Golden State Warriors, Steph Curry have certainly earned it. And Jalen Brunson's unbelievable, but I'm not sure the Knicks had really earned that yet. Sure. But I get it. But it is interesting to see something play out like this. And then, of course, the next narrative is, are the Pacers what X number of worst Eastern or Conference Finals team are they? What do you think about them, where they're at going into this?
I think, well, first off, obviously the detractors are going to say, I say that as if I'm not one every once in a while. But you're obviously going to look at it and say, well, okay, well, they beat Milwaukee without Giannis, and they beat the Knicks mostly without Anunoby, with, Josh Hart dealing with ridiculous abdomen strain in the last couple games. Jalen Brunson couldn't play the fourth quarter because he broke his hand. Mitchell Robinson was already out. Bogan was already out. Julius Randle has been out for months. So they were dealing with injuries on top of injuries on top of injuries. And there's something to be said for that. But it makes the playoff run a little bit less impressive if you're just saying, okay, wow, all right, where do you put? How big of an upset is this? It's less of an upset when you're thinking about what was actually there that they had to beat, sure. But they did beat playoff caliber teams both times. I think if you even take the guys off the list that were out, they're still playoff caliber teams. Certainly Milwaukee. I think if you put together a team with Damian Lillard, Chris Middleton operating at the height of his powers, and Brook Lopez, and you play that team in Bobby Portis, and you play that team, for 82 games, they get in the playoffs. Are they the top 2 seed? No. Are they a title contender? No. You're not talking about them as the best team with the best chance to beat the Celtics, but that's a pretty good team, and they beat him, 4 out of 6. And again, they come in not having home field advantage in any of these. They were down 3-2 to the Celtics. Jalen Brunson was on an absolute bender, was probably the best player in these playoffs, prior to maybe game 5. Through 5 games, and through the first series he had with the Sixers, he was playing as well as anybody. He's one of the most dominant forces in playoff basketball, and they did manage to eventually eke out and get those wins. And those are 2 impressive victories. From the time these playoffs started, you've been looking at a scenario and say there's Boston and there's everybody else, and that, so it's like, all right, like any of the other, 8, I guess 9, if you count even the play-in teams. I mean, I guess Chicago or Atlanta would have shocked you if they got through. But everybody from the Knicks to Miami, you're like, all right, well, they've got a crack at it. Those are teams that are talented enough to cause trouble. And so the Pacers rising out of that group isn't totally nuts. And they have a gear that no one else has. They are obviously not consistent. They obviously go through stretches where they're not as good as they could be. But when they're firing on all cylinders, when that offense is really, really clicking, they can be the best of the group, and clearly the best of the group. And so, I mean, like, Boston's the only team that can even hang with them at that stage. I mean, like, again, they just set a playoff record for, highest field goal shooting percentage. Like, I mean, like, that game was wild. If like every piece you look at it, I mean, they shot like 70% from the paint, 54% from 3, and they were 14 of 18 from like mid-range, like long twos between the paint and 3-point range. Like, that's how good they were yesterday. So, like, you can only discount what they've done so much. Again, like, going in and winning at the Garden is a big deal. I don't care who's hurt. Winning in the Garden in Game 7 is a big deal. Not a lot of teams have pulled it off. So, like, they're a legitimately really good playoff basketball team. And in a year where you're also seeing the situation shake up in the West, where you've got Minnesota and Dallas, where 2 teams that I would not have picked to be here, and the defending champion is out. Like, they have as much right to claim that they belong in these conference finals as anybody else, with the exception of the Celtics, who've been the best team all year.
Yeah, I mean, they beat the Bucks 4 out of 5 during the regular season.
Yeah,
what you said is 100% true, but I don't think there's a legitimate complaint that you can make the argument, more than the argument, that the Pacers were better than the Bucks this year. They beat the Knicks in the regular season too, but the Knicks did not have Anunoby for any of those. They obviously didn't have him. The Pacers should have won Game 1 even with Anunoby out there, but on the other hand is Tom Thibodeau plays these guys into the ground, and that's then you play who shows up and you take advantage of it.
Sure.
I want to get a little bit into the whole Brunson Halliburton thing. First of all, Jalen Brunson was unbelievable in the second half of the season, as we've discussed before. No one is taking anything away from him. When you get compared to Bernard King, 84 playoff run, you're as legit as it gets. But Tyrese Halliburton had several poor games in the series. Two poor games, I think.
Two distinctly poor games. Yeah, Game 1 and Game 5.
So, and 100% deserves the criticism for playing poorly in those games, blah, blah, blah. But Brunson, 10 of 26, 6 of 17, 11 of 26, 6 of 17. Those are the 4 losses by the Knicks. How come Halliburton gets criticized when he doesn't have a good game, and no one cares when Brunson doesn't have a good game?
I mean, because like, it's the second number. It's the field goal attempts. And I know, so it's like, and they have, Halliburton and Carlisle have both started to make this point, and they're right that, you can't base it all on field goal attempts, whether he's aggressive or effective or not. And Halliburton's made the clear case that it's about whether I get 2 feet in the paint. And he's right. He's totally right. Like, he is, like, if he is getting downhill, he is effective. That whether he takes 10 shots or he takes 20, if he's getting in the paint and he's kicking out, like that's fine. Like him creating for others while being aggressive is fine. The issue is that when he has been quiet, he's not been doing that either. If you look at game 5, they still weren't, he still wasn't getting in the paint. You know, he was getting stopped. You know, he was being passive. He was getting rid of the ball too early. He was not really, probing with the dribble at all. But he kind of disappeared basically. And that's the phrase a lot of people use is he was invisible. And so, that might be fair. That might not be fair, in terms of just saying, all right, like these guys are all over me. I got to get rid of the basketball. That's the smart move here. But you think, okay, like you probably had some occasions where you could have pressed the issue a little bit. You could at least, probed the paint. You could have driven at somebody, attacked a little bit more, done something more off the ball just to find a way to get yourself a little bit more involved because you were less involved than you needed to be. When Jalen Brunson takes 26 shots and they just don't go in, it's like, all right, well, that guy is trying to do everything he can. It's like, it looks like activity. And so even, yesterday he's 6 of 17, but he is just grinding his way to get some space to hit a 6-7 foot jump shot. And they weren't going in. And so it's just like, I don't think it's just harder to criticize that. Especially as a Knicks fan, they like his grit. They like that he's in attack mode all the time. They like that he's bouncing off of the guys. They like that it's just like he has these just, hell or high water moves that, he's just going to find a way to get some space. And like, that's what he's at in his best. So they're like, all right, well, I'm not going to get mad if, you're not getting the rolls on these jump shots. It's like you're giving yourself a good chance. You've made that shot a billion times. Keep going after it. It just feels better if you're a Knicks fan and you're watching this and you're saying, well, that's what I want that guy to do. He's not going to be successful all the time, but I'd rather him try it than, sort of sit back. And so Halliburton doesn't get, so he gets criticized worse when he's quiet, and maybe he doesn't get as much praise when he goes off. And, when he does stuff like he did, 34 in game 2, 35 in game 3, I don't know. I think it's just, again, it's what he looks like when you watch him. He's skinnier. He's not bouncing off of people. He just doesn't look as physical. And so it ends up being a kind of like, optical illusion way that ends up being unfair that way. But I mean, like the games when he was good in this series, he was special. And so, and you saw a lot of growth within it. I mean, I think, I said the last time we podcasted that basically like there's a lot, he is learning a lot. There is a lot that he's going to be able to take away. Some of it he's not going to be able to really apply until he gets an off season and gets to get back in the weight room and sees more things that he can do to be more aggressive, to get himself more space to shoot, bounce off people, be better playing through contact. But he's learned at every step of the way, got an idea of, okay, what do I have to do to combat this? And I thought, he dealt with like one kind of path of defense in game 1. Figured out how to attack that. Then they brought Miles McBride on. It was a different scenario. That guy was really getting after him for 94 feet. And he had to figure out, okay, what am I going to do to get past this guy? What do I have to do to get myself in a better situation? And the Pacers did a good job of springing him open with a lot of off the ball stuff, or just playing faster and kind of putting the Knicks in scramble mode more often in game 6 and game 7 than they were in it in game 5. And, obviously playing in transition defense helps that. But, like Halliburton did still learn in that. And then, you do see that he's got some killer in him. He likes jawing with people. And like if a fan is going to get into it with him, he loves that. And somebody decided to make some cracks on him from in the front row in game 7 in the Garden. He was like, all right, this is what we're going to do then. And he stuck four 3-pointers in the first quarter and got going. And so figure out what he can be. But I think there's a lot of things he's going to be able to see from Jalen Brunson to give himself a sense of how he can build his game. But, that being said, he has still made a lot of strides just game to game in this. He's learned at every turn, who he has to be that game, like, and how he has to combat what they're doing. He's had bad games, but then he has responded. I mean, I think he was defended 2 different ways in this series. DiVincenzo guarded him one way. He kind of figured out how that was going to go. And then, stacked 34, 35, and then 20 in the blowout in game 4. They came back with a different approach with Miles McBride in game 5 and really defended him for 94 feet. Didn't do a good job in that one, but, took the lessons from that, went back, said, okay, what do I need to do to get past this guy? And the Pacers looked at it and said, what do we need we need to do to get Halliburton past this guy. Did a lot of good off the ball work to give him some opportunities, and he got some clean shots. They also defended better, played better in transition overall, and just allowed him to really go off, especially in Game 7, obviously. And he got himself motivated. He enjoys having people, talk stuff to him basically from the sidelines, especially fans. And he, had a guy decided that he was going to be loud and, got in Halliburton's face, and Halliburton's like, okay. And he hit 4 out of 5 threes in the first quarter and really got rolling and came out of that post-game press conference really sort of, feeling his oats there. And so, I think, you have seen, the good, the bad, the high, and the low of Halliburton in the series. He's in these playoffs. He's been spectacular in some games. He's been shaky in others. Again, there's a lot he has to work on, but he is going to walk away with a playoff performance that he can be proud of, one that he can build on, but one that he can eventually be proud of wherever that ends up, whether that's this series or the next.
Yeah, I mean, Brunson shot 38% in those 4 games that I've referenced, 21% from 3. I mean, to me, maybe you don't want someone shooting that much when they're not playing well. Now, again, the Knicks, he had to, because who else did the Knicks have? Everything's revolving around him. DiVincenzo was great in most of the games. I'm just picking on the fact that we have to have a narrative around guys after every game. And again, certainly Halliburton did not play well at all in those 2 games, but it's like the other 4 games didn't exist. The 4 or 5 games didn't exist when he has one bad game, and it just it's always shocking to me. We did not mention that we should have that Benedict Mathurin has missed the entire playoff series. Benedict Mathurin does not equal Giannis Antetokounmpo, or certainly what the Knicks were all missing, but it's not like the Pacers are at full strength. I mean, did they win Game 1 if Benedict Mathurin's playing? Entirely possible. So it's just worth pointing out. Let's look ahead in terms of the Celtics. I mean, we've talked about this a little bit. Naismith is going to guard Tatum or Brown. Siakam guarding the other guy? Who do they match up with? I mean, that to me, that's the big question, is how you match up with this Celtics team.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's your best bet is just, Tatum's their best player, so you put your best defender on him and go from there. I mean, and maybe you switch it up if it doesn't seem like it's working. It's tough because, again, like Nesmith's your best option against Tatum, and he's your best option against Brown, and you got to pick one or the other. So that's kind of a tough deal. And so obviously when one of them comes off the floor, Nesmith defends the other one, when he's on the floor. But that again is the tough scenario, is that these guys are going to play somewhere in the area of 40 minutes, and they're probably not going to play Nesmith somewhere in the area of 40 minutes. So Ben Shepherd is going to have to guard these guys for part of this. And so, that's what makes the Celtics deadly, is that you've got to deal with them. And by the way, when you're done dealing with, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, there's also Derek White and Drew Holiday. And
Halliburton has to guard one of them.
Halliburton has to guard one of them. So, that's a tough deal. And then on top of that, they're going to bring off the bench Sam Hauser and Peyton Pritchard. I mean, they don't have a great bench, but they got 2 guys that can get buckets. Like top to bottom, their bench isn't nearly as good as the Pacers is. Like when you're putting the Pacers 5 bench guys against the Celtics 5 bench guys, the Pacers win that. But, with shrunken benches, Sam Hauser is trouble and Peyton Pritchard's trouble. So it is not easy to defend this group, and it will get even harder once Kristaps, presuming he does, Porzingis comes back. You have a little bit, Miles Turner's going to be able to maybe roam a little bit with Al Horford. But Horford's been good. So you can't, totally sleep on that guy either. But yeah, it's not an easy scenario. I mean, I would go Nesmith on Tatum until you find out you can't. Just because he gives you your best chance, and just hope that Siakam can do enough against Jaylen Brown that you don't get killed in that circumstance. But it's not an easy call. And again, like they're 2 really, really tough guards that can, get you inside and out. And Jaylen Brown can really play downhill on you. And so that could be trouble for Siakam. But so obviously Tatum's slightly bigger, but I think Tatum's a better player, and he's not so much bigger that Nesmith can't handle him. Nesmith is dealt with much, much bigger players than Jason Tatum before.
And as you mentioned, Porzingis is reportedly out the first 2 games. They'll evaluate after that. You just touched on this, but I mean, is Miles Turner the most important player, the X factor, however you want to label him for this game, or for this series, excuse me?
Yeah, I mean, he's up there. He's just the guy that he just has to produce. Like, I don't think you can, it's going to be really hard to win this series if you're not getting really good Miles Turner, because it's just like that's the place where you've got the best opportunity. Siakam and Turner both are going to have some advantages. They'll have some. Siakam, I don't think he's taller than Tatum, but he's got more length, so he'll be able to score over him. If Tatum guards him, whether it's Tatum or Brown guarding him, he's going to have just that length ability to get up and shoot over those guys. He's going to be able to post them up. He's going to be able to get them the ways he usually gets people. But those guys can certainly guard, and then either White or Holiday, and really both are going to defend Halliburton, and that's tough. I mean, those are two of the best on-ball defensive players in the league. In the NBA, there's a reason why Drew Holiday was one of the first guys that were like, yeah, he's playing on the Olympic team. There's not even a question about it. It doesn't matter what he's scoring or not scoring. Drew Holiday's as good as it gets in terms of just, hawking the ball. So that's what Tyrese Halliburton is up for in this series. So it's going to be something. I think they need Miles Turner, a really good Miles Turner, to have a chance.
And then TJ McConnell's obviously been phenomenal throughout most of the last series. Yes. After a slow start against the Bucks. But as you mentioned, the Celtics, Holiday, White are longer guards, excellent defensive guards. How much can they neutralize TJ McConnell in this series, and how big a factor is that going to play?
And honestly, you don't know when only going to play him against Pritchard or what. Or if the Celtics are only going to play Pritchard against him, what that's going to look like. And Pritchard McConnell is going to be a battle, when it's those two guys out there. Like that's going to be a serious battle on either end. So they could probably neutralize him a little bit, but I mean, I think what you've seen is that, McConnell takes advantage of getting underestimated all the time. Is that he can get downhill and he can hit a little 6-foot jumper over you, on just about anybody. And so if you're not taking him seriously enough, he can still get you. He's just a really hard guy to keep in front. So I think McConnell's going to get some of his. I mean, I'm trying to remember. I don't know off the top of my head how he's done against Boston this year. But I'm
looking at that right now. Missed one game, played 12 minutes in another, went 3 of 3, 9 minutes in another, went 1 of 5. But that was I had 8 assists between those two games, 3 steals. So I wouldn't say he was terrible in those games. And then had a good game on January 8th when he's 6 of 12, 7 assists, 4 rebounds, 12 points. That was a win for them. For the Pacers.
That was the Halliburton injury game.
Yeah. And then November 1st, he went 8 of 13, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, 18 points, which all sounds great until I tell you they lost by 51. So perhaps the Celtics weren't too keyed in on TJ McConnell in that one.
No.
So in one of the wins he played well. In one of the wins he wasn't much of a factor. And then in the losses he actually played okay, but neither is too telling given the final score and also how many minutes he played in one of those games. But that'll be an interesting matchup to watch. However, it
sure.
Dustin, any final thoughts heading into the Celtics series?
I think obviously these guys have proven time again that you can't write them off. Basically, that you have to give them a chance or presume that they have a chance because, again, they just have a gear that not a lot of teams have. They have depth that not a lot of teams have. They are playing inspired basketball, and when they can make shots and when they can get going in transition, they can beat anybody. And they proved it throughout the regular season. They've grown up a lot in these playoffs. And so, while I presume Boston's going to win these series, and if you made me pick it, I will, and I probably will pick them to win.
We are going to make you pick it.
Was that okay? Well,
game by game. We don't want to spoil anything.
Right, exactly. I mean, I am going to pick the Celtics. I'll pick the Celtics in game 1, but that doesn't mean these guys don't have a chance. They have an opportunity, and they've earned the right. They've earned the right to be here, and they are dangerous. They remain dangerous, especially for a Celtics team that has been close before and not got as far as they want to. If you're the Celtics, you have every reason to be a little bit nervous about this. So it is going to be an interesting series, no matter how it goes. Even if it's a 4-0 series, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be top 2 teams in offensive efficiency in this season. It's got a chance to really be something.
We will wrap it up before we lose Dustin again. This is Nat Newell, Dustin Dopriak for IndyStar.com. Please go to IndyStar.com for all your Pacers coverage.